Morning, everybody. Welcome to the Battery. My name's Colleen Curlin. I'm part of the member events team here. Thanks so much for joining us. We're really excited about this event tonight. We're putting it on in partnership with FinTech Silicon Valley. So we are always anxious to do such of interest. And so it was a really great partnership that was brought to us. And so without further ado, I'm going to introduce the founder of FinTech Silicon Valley, Pemo Theodore.
Thanks, Colleen. First of all, I'd really like to thank Gilly because we lost one member of our panel. Michelle Munson had to travel tonight to an important meeting. And this happens in the startup world, as you know. And Gilly was very kind enough to offer to stand in very quickly. So thank you so much. And I'm going to pass this over now to Phil Jurdy, who's our moderator tonight, and he's going to introduce the others. Thank you.
Yeah, it's gonna, not right now, just wait. I just want to know more about the audience. So I'm Phil, I work for 30 years in information system and organization, and I love to moderate panel about the blockchain. That's why you have in front of me. I hope you will enjoy. And let's start. So just for the panelists to know who is in front of them. So speaking about the blockchain, who is a beginner who doesn't know anything about the blockchain? Raise your hand. All right. So, and who's I would say an expert, knows very well? No one?
That's I can tell.
Too shy.
There's no such thing.
All right. No one is investing in bitcoins, this type of things? No? No. Ah, okay, good.
More people should. Yeah.
All right. Okay, fine. So now it's time to introduce the panelists. So I used to do that on the alphabetical order. So Adam, you'll be the first one to. Yes, I think Ettinger is the first. And so could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. My name's Adam Ettinger. I'm a partner at the law firm of Fisher & Broyles. And we're a law firm of 240 partners in 21 cities. I run a blockchain team that has 20 partners. I've been in the space. I think we're giving background later, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll hold off. That was me.
And then Jan, you're the next.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Ian with IDEO Collab's Crypto Venture Fund. I'll talk more about that later. I'm one of the managing directors there and focused on investments.
Paul?
Hey guys, I'm Paul Mead, co-founder of Matter Music with Josh Patton here.
Hi.
Okay, so Josh.
Yes, I'm Josh, co-founder of Matter, also a songwriter, producer, touring artist, signed to Skrillex's label. Yep.
Right. Gili?
Hi, my name is Gili Ovadia. I'm heading global business development for Orbs, which is a public blockchain for enterprise.
Okay, so we have a very diverse, panelist, and I'd like to start now. It doesn't matter. The first one should. I think it's very interesting to have how you get into the blockchain, and everyone has its own story. So I think it's a good example to give a taste of. Adam, you're the older in the industry, I've heard.
Oh, in the industry, yes.
In the industry.
So I've been a technology lawyer from Silicon Valley since '94, and I got pulled in 2012 because I'd done a lot of chip design companies. And some people had this great idea for a new chip design using ASICs for Bitcoin mining. And I was like, what? And that's how I got pulled in. And I've just been pretty much all of my practice ever since. I went from there to one of the number 2 payment company, GoCoin, and the number one wallet and security company, BitGo, Lightning Labs, and just about anything also outside blockchain council for MasterCard. And it's just been wonderful because it's been very, very disruptive and it allows for a very, very thoughtful but a very heavily fueled effort by the lawyers involved.
But how it was, because by that time, I can imagine 2012 blockchain is like, it's like curiosity, or you're a curious guy, or?
Well, it's funny because you've heard of it, but it sounded like, I remember somebody the same person wanted to tip me something like $2,000 in bitcoins, which I think today would probably be $20 million or something. And I was like, you can keep your bitsy coinsy things. And I say it was unusual because before I was a lawyer, I actually was a network engineer. I actually put networks together and did this kind of thing, and yet it really wasn't on my radar yet. And then, like a lot of people, I actually read, the paper after I said no to the bitsy coinsy things. But we were starting to produce chips and doing designs for TSMC, so it was serious. And the people that were investing in the company were some of the best and the brightest people that I'd ever worked with in the Silicon Valley. So, that gives you kind of a clue that something was up. And then after that, it was very funny because unlike any other technology, because before this I dealt with ad tech and wireless security and TiVo and and a lot of chip design. But you really had this, it was almost like a whole bunch of people who weren't sleeping much, many of whom were smoking a lot, and I don't mean marijuana, I mean just cigarettes, because they were just trying to calm down because they were not sleeping much, but heavily involved. And they were some of the best and the brightest people from around the world that I'd ever worked with. And so from there, it took a lot of time before it really hit the public radar. But it was also challenging because before, there wasn't any regulation until 2013 in the United States. March 2013 is when FinCEN, Department of Treasury, actually said, we're going to treat this like currency. Before that, we didn't know if government might say this is entirely illegal or what. And so it was very, very challenging for investors here in the Silicon Valley and elsewhere to even consider it. And even after that, there was so much regulatory ambiguity that it only really belonged to the most courageous entrepreneurs and investors to move into the space. Now, they've all done very, very well because of that. But it wasn't readily apparent, and most of us, I can tell you that I was lucky because at the time I had a lot of support from my partners, but they had no idea what this was or because it was so challenging to explain. Does that
help
give
I
more
guess.
background?
Yes. Josh, you have a different story, but it's quite interesting too.
I actually didn't tell you the very beginning. So when I was in undergrad at Penn State, do you guys remember Ross Albright?
Yeah.
He was the founder of Silk Road. And he hit up one of my friends who is a computer science major, asked if he could help with a blockchain-related product, and it turned out to be Silk Road. My friend said no, but that was the first time I heard about crypto. And then a few years later, I started trading on Coinbase. It wasn't much action, and then somebody hit me up in a Facebook private group and told me to buy Walton Chain. It was like a really shady-looking Chinese coin, but I put in around like $3,000. It 8 times. In like 3 weeks, went to like 25,000. And then after that, I hit up one of my college friends who got really big into trading. He was one of my best friends. He's actually our HR head at our company right now. But he dropped out of school after I graduated. He lost like 40,000 his first year and then made a couple $1 million. So I told him to fly to LA. He flew out the next day and taught me how to trade shitcoins. And I made probably like $80,000 in the next 2 months when I was on the road touring. And I got a lot of other DJs into crypto. I was in a group with Blau, who founded, he's an advisor at Audius. He was in our group, and we were just teaching people how to trade. And people were making a lot of money. They thought they could all quit their music jobs, and then everything crashed like 2 months later. So that's how I kind of got into it. And then him and another friend named Ryan Jacob, who's a producer in Australia, they reached out to me to help on a project. And we were called LiveStream at the time. And we just started working on this together, and he brought me on as a co-founder for Matter. Yeah.
I think Adam was mentioning bank. It seems that it's your background, and how did you get into get tired of the bank industry? Or?
Yeah, so I think some of you might know me actually in a former life. I got into crypto in 2014 when I was at Citigroup's venture arm called Citi Ventures, and the first week that I was hired, they didn't have a computer because it takes forever to get onboarded. And so they told me, like, just go read something. And I was like, well, what am I supposed to read? And they're like, I don't know, just look at this Bitcoin thing because no one actually cares about it. So I was like, okay, fine, whatever. So I read the 10-page white paper. It took me like 3 full days to understand it, to wrap my head around it. But I had been studying open software systems for about 10 years prior, in what iOS and Android had done to software and mobile apps, and pretty immediately I was like, holy shit, this is an open FinTech stack that is completely decentralized. So I became a really big proponent of it kind of late 2014. in the banking industry at one of the biggest banks in the world. So I got kicked out of a lot of boardrooms for the first 6 months. And then 6 months later, in mid-2015, they were inviting me back in. It was a really interesting time because, as Adam was mentioning, I mean, there was a lot of regulatory uncertainty. A lot of banks, incumbents, I mean, even to this day, are very anti-blockchains and crypto. And what became kind of the trigger for it was ultimately that clients, some of the largest clients of Citibank in the world, were asking Citigroup what our point of view on it was, and it always ended up back at me. So it became pretty fascinating. I was part of a team that was advising the UK, China, which is kind of interesting because it's now resuscitating, on initially what the impact of decentralized cryptocurrencies might be on sovereign governments, and how might a central bank or a sovereign government actually take the technology and use it for its own purposes. You hear these reports recently about how China is going to launch their own digital currency. We were involved in that 5 years ago. Obviously, it's evolved a lot since then. And so I was the blockchain lead at Citigroup for 3 years. During my time there in 2015, I helped IDEO, which some of you may know. It's a 40-year-old design and innovation company. I helped IDEO start a division focused on crypto in 2015, initially doing research, trying to understand how the technology would ultimately go mainstream and make an impact in the real world with real people, real businesses, right? And at the time, people thought, like, why are you even doing that? It's all about infrastructure and scalability. But now, obviously, people care a lot about it. So I left Citi Ventures as I was trading altcoins. I was like, the bank's never going to hold altcoins on its balance sheet. I joined IDEO, helped them spin out a venture capital fund, actually that bears IDEO's name. And we've now invested in 15 companies that we actually incubate and help with product development to go to market. So a lot of like on-the-ground learnings about how to make this technology real and how to get it in the hands of real people so it actually gets used.
And finally, Gilly.
So I came into the blockchain rabbit hole quite late compared to you guys. I studied law back in the days and played around with some startups. I had 2 startups that I co-founded, and I was the business guy, and I partnered with 2 very strong tech guys. It was around 2006 and 5 and 7, and nothing really came out of it. And then I moved on and moved to the government. I was a personal advisor to the Minister of Defense in Israel, and then I moved on to I did my internship in law, hate every second, and move on being a diplomat here. For the last 5 years, I served as an Israeli consul here in San Francisco. And then the 2 founders from 2005 got back to me. They did really well since one of them sold his company to Alibaba, the other one sold his company to Wix.com, but we still had a really good friendship. And they asked me, hey, can you help us join our company and run the global business, because you've done some business mostly in the government level for the last 5 years. And I said yes, and now I'm leading global business development for the company. And we are more on the trust side, less on the financial side of the blockchain, trying to develop different use cases for enterprise and try to bring trust at scale using blockchain.
Great. So it's never too late to start doing something in blockchain, put some money, work on it. How can we summarize for beginners what the blockchain can bring in media? We'll get more into each domain of the media after that, but how can we summarize the few items that are, okay, the blockchain is really bringing an opportunity here in the media in general? Can we summarize? Has someone has the courage to do so, or some idea? I got some, but I'm not supposed to give the answers at the same time, otherwise, why should I moderate? What is bringing the blockchain to media?
I'll take a stab at that.
Thank you.
I'm the least media savvy person here so I'll start. I think broadly, right, there are 2 really powerful capabilities, if you will, of this technology. One is giving more ownership and control to the people who create and own assets, right? So if you think about it in the context of banking, which is where it all started, it was really decentralizing the ownership and power away from central intermediaries like Citigroup and JP Morgan and towards people and the owners of the network or the users of the network, which in the initial days was Bitcoin, right? The creator of the Bitcoin and also the users of the Bitcoin network. So I think that same kind of capability can be abstracted to a lot of other industries and verticals, including media, whether it's like music or video or other forms of digital media, where it's giving control back to the creators on the network and the owners of the network. So creators in that case being the artists, like people who make music, or other forms of valuable content. So that's like kind of one thing. The second thing is, and some folks here are working on things that don't have a crypto token, but I think that one of the most powerful innovations is when a network has a crypto token and uses that crypto token to facilitate and coordinate incentives and behavior across a distributed or decentralized network. That is really difficult to do without one. So, centralized companies and organizations do a pretty good job of coordinating human behavior through traditional business models, whether it's like advertising or like subscriptions or whatever. But like what a tokenized network enables is a totally different business model for coordinating human behavior in a decentralized way. And I think those two things are really meaningful and very applicable to lots of industries, including media.
Great, Jan. Thank you very much. So we are here, maybe Adam and Gili, before I'd like to come into the music. I'm coming right now. Stay with us. But how do you see, where do you see, in which company, which domain, keeping the media in mind, Adam and Gili, you see the blockchain being kind of, people really believe in this technology and are doing some stuff on that, if you can disclose a few names.
Well, it's, there's big concept stuff, which is, I think, ultimately the most compelling in the space. We haven't seen a lot of traction with it. So Ujo, which we were talking about before the panel, came out, I believe, in 2015, and the big concept is media that licenses itself. And it really isn't that challenging. As we were saying, what this allows people to do is to have ownership over digital content in a decentralized way. So imagine we wanted to produce an album. We can produce an album together. We decide, I'm the engineer and he's a musician, he's a singer, that we're going to share royalties, third, a third, a third. We can put that into a smart contract, wrap it around the content, and now every time he wants to listen to it or he wants to put it on television in France, hopefully the smart contract is smart enough that it can actually license itself, collect the money in cryptocurrency, and then distribute it to the three of us. So to me, this is actually, it's sort of a, not will it happen, it's more of a when. Just like Amazon, in terms of selling every book that you just couldn't get at the store. It was just a matter of when. But we just, since 2015, we really haven't seen this, for a number of reasons, really roll out and take traction and get built as well. The other ones where we do see, I think, a lot of traction and growth are things like in Los Angeles, there's Viatomic, which had a Swiss counterpart called Block V, and they just did this most interesting thing with Coca-Cola, where using augmented reality in Times Square, 100,000, I can't remember the number, let's say 100,000 butterflies, virtual butterflies were created. But each one of these butterflies were unique and had a unique expression on a blockchain. And if you got one, you had that butterfly. And that butterfly could have any kind of contact, whether it was an advertising content or it was a unique butterfly, so you could trade butterflies with other people like Pokemon cards, or I suppose collect butterflies like butterflies. Now that I think about it, so it's reimagining now that you have ownership and content and uniqueness, and what can you do with that? And so that I think we are seeing roll out, but again, it takes time, it takes convincing, it takes, in this case, agencies have to get up to speed and understand, the clients have to. But I think we see a lot of that. There's also been a lot of sort of different crowdfunding models. So use crowdfunding on the blockchain to finance your movie. Use crowdfunding on the model to finance. To me, I like crowdfunding, so it's attractive, but it isn't. To me, it's not high concept. It's just you had this on Kickstarter, you had it on others. Now we're just using tokenization, really. Yulia.
Gili, I think you're traveling and you're flying to New York or this type. Tell us a little bit more, like kind of stories and
Yes, I'll start more on the abstract level. I would like to add to what Ian mentioned, maybe one or two, or actually three new concepts I think blockchain can add to the media, and we call it the guarantees that it provides. And the three main guarantees that we count is one, auditability, to allow any participant and any user to really audit whatever data is running on the network. And you can just imagine and apply the auditability to music, to media, to advertisement, but basically being able to have transparency. The second guarantee is forkability, to being able to take your data and leave if you're not happy with the way the platform is behaving. And the third one, and I think this is the most interesting one, is governance. Basically being able to really affect the way the algorithm or the code is working, and being able to really affect this. And I think these three guarantees can apply to music, media, advertising, etc. What we're doing in New York and what we're doing in the music industry is we are a tech partner for an initiative run by MIT. It's called Open Music Initiative. And this is run by MIT and Berklee School of Music out of Boston. And the idea is to have a public registry for music, and allow these artists to really keep track of the music, to get some monetization, something that they don't see this day with this intermediate rule in the market. And we are trying to really provide these three guarantees that I just mentioned into the music world. And I can tell you it's very, very complex, the music industry in the US, with tons of agencies and licensing, and you probably know about it, Adam. But it's something that's been run for a couple of years, and there's no clear solution yet, but we believe it's possible.
But we have Josh and we have Paul. And so what's the vision you have with, because it's not just about music, but what is the vision you have with the
So like
company?
how Adam mentioned, the smart splits around, like, let's say all of us three make a song together. That's kind of the first layer application you can use blockchain for. But we're looking kind of beyond that, as how do you track the supply chain of like consumer attention, where it's like, let's say I post a picture of me wearing a sweatshirt, or Josh is going to a show tonight, and then like you see that on your feed. How does our social impact lead you to make a financial transaction? And when that transaction does occur, we're creating a blockchain that allows me and Josh to get paid for driving traffic that ultimately ends up in you purchasing that sweatshirt, purchasing that event ticket, listening to that song. So looking at the splits behind blockchain, all right, there's something that can happen and there's a financial transaction. What consumer attention leads to that transaction, and how do you get those nodes paid? Same way you'd pay to have your impressions on Twitter, impressions on Google AdWords, Amazon FBA, all of that you pay a corporation to put your advertisement in front of somebody, and all of us are kind of like miniature Googles. We all have people that look at our feed, and we drive traffic to somebody else.
Josh, you're an artist, you're a producer.
Yeah, going off of what Gilly was saying, we realized a lot of people are doing music platforms on the blockchain. Like, some of my friends are at Audius, some people were at Tune. But what I realized was nobody's making money anyways. It doesn't matter how many catalogs you have. It doesn't matter if you have 1,000 songs on SoundCloud, you're not getting paid at all, you know? Like, I wouldn't have a career without SoundCloud. I think I started posting in like 2012 or 13. And within 2 years, I was signed, basically making a lot of money touring. And like, it was only because of SoundCloud, but I never made a cent streaming off of SoundCloud. Maybe like a few cents. I think I got like a few cents a year. And Spotify, you still get paid decently, but what we realize is like nobody's getting paid. So even if we create a new music platform based on the blockchain, and you know exactly where every cent's going, if it's only like 10 cents, nobody's gonna care. So we started focusing on building multiple revenue streams. In addition to music, we have social posts, so you can post. We're developing short form content right now. If you know about TikTok, it's like the biggest startup right now, and they're working with distributors to distribute music on it, but we're trying to figure out, let's say Kylie Jenner's on our platform and she plays something for 5 seconds. She does that with a lot of people's music, but she never gets paid for anything. But if she's driving like 50,000, 100,000 listeners a day to somebody's song, and that's accounted for through the blockchain in the back end, like she can get paid for that. So that's kind of stuff we're working on. And we're also working on developing live streaming and how people can get paid with tokens, get donations. Because you guys know how big Twitch is, but musicians that go on Twitch generally don't get much traffic because people aren't even looking for that. So we're creating basically like the Facebook for musicians and creators and artists. Yeah.
Yeah, people used to, like growing up, I'd buy tons of CDs, had posters on my wall, and then like LimeWire came out, kind of removed people's expectation of having to pay for music, having to pay for content. It's easier to pirate music now, easier to pirate media than it is to go and like sign up to a new platform. So a lot of things we have to do is like not just offer content and have an easy way to pay for it, but it's giving creators a way to share intimacy, intimate content, real relations, real connections. The same way video games aren't maybe extremely exciting, but when you have the video game player there responding directly back to you, it gives you a sense of like recognition in the world, a sense of significance. And we're trying to deliver that content where it's not just content, but it's content that has purpose to the viewer.
I'd like to zoom, we will cover some other aspect of the media, but I'd like to do a zoom on creating a startup, because we are lucky to have you, Jan, and seems that you are kind of incubating startup, investing in startup, developing a blockchain solution. So how does it look? What's the, how does an entrepreneur comes and wants to develop something on this big machine? What is that?
Yeah. Well, I might be, I mean, you guys should talk, obviously, as entrepreneurs in the space, but I think
mic.
one of the more interesting things is how these blockchains and crypto networks are enabling startups to form in very different and new ways. And so, like, you know, traditional startup or venture creation looks like, 2 or 3 people, they create a pitch deck, they go to Sand Hill Road, they do this road show, they get some money, they raise a bunch of money, they hire a team, and then they build out their product, and then they ship it 18 months to 2 years later. In the case of blockchains, right, these are it's open source software. So immediately, if your startup or your technology or your thing kind of looks like something that already exists out there, you can do what's called forking it, right? Which is basically you can take the open source code, which is all out there for public viewing, you take it, you copy it, and then you modify it. And you can deploy that onto the Ethereum network or some other public blockchain within hours or a weekend, and see what the actual usage is. And that can happen without any money at all. So what's interesting is that a lot of the entrepreneurs or technologists that we see have already been tinkering with deploying what are called smart contracts onto these public blockchains, and in some cases getting thousands, or in the blockchain case more likely hundreds of users with real kind of traction. I mean, and this is the best case scenario. And so that in itself is pretty disruptive to the venture model, at least the traditional venture model, which is why we're really excited about this, because IDEO is not known for making investments, at least historically, but we are known for designing things, building things, creating things, getting things into the world and getting them into the hands of users. So for us, it's actually really awesome, because what building a startup looks like is actually going back to just creating and shipping, like constantly and all the time, and tweaking and iterating based on feedback. And so for us, that's what's most exciting. And because of that, that enables us to deliver value to these startups, work with these startups much earlier in the process, much more iteratively. And also because these software code is open source and globally available, it enables us to work with entrepreneurs all over the world. So out of the 15 startups that we've invested in, I want to say about 60% are outside of the U.S., which most other traditional VCs would not even touch because they know what they know and it's within the U.S. only. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but
Of course you do. Paul, what is that to create a blockchain in Korea?
To give background in that question, so I was in school for financial engineering, quantitative finance, and in that class curriculum you learn a lot about arbitrage programming, StatArb. And I was taking tests on it, and I realized the price between US and Korean won denominated Bitcoin had 30 up to 45% spreads. So I took my student loan money, got a ticket to Korea, and at the beginning I started moving suitcases full of money back and forth. So I'd buy Bitcoin in the United States, I'd go to a couple Airbnbs until I found a host that I kind of trusted and be like, hey, I'll give you some money if you can cash out of crypto for me. And they'll do that, and I'd fill up my bag with money and go back and forth. On the flights going between them, I started writing an algorithm to trade it so I wouldn't have to talk to hosts. But basically, when the spread was basically blown out, I would transfer money over, sell it, hold into Korean won, hedge the USD KRW spread. And then when the spread contracted, I would basically do the reverse. I would buy back Bitcoin in Korea, send to the United States, and cash out in US dollars. And I did that for several months until larger market makers started to close the spread to less than 1%, and I sold that company to a prop shop in Chicago. So, and I guess to answer your question, what's it like to start one there? I don't know Korean, so that's when I started making music when I was over in Korea. And I spent an unnecessary amount of money on legal fees, because when I was moving money back and forth, I obviously wanted to do it in a more legal and straightforward way, and I spent $40,000, $50,000 on counsel and never got a straightforward answer. It was always
it wasn't me. I just want to be clear. You met tonight.
Yeah, so the Korean council, they say there's no law around this, what you're doing in blockchain yet, so we can't really tell you one way or the other. So that led me to go ahead and start to trade it mathematically rather than using a legal remittance policy. But ultimately, if there was a way to remit it, it would have been phenomenal. Maybe buying gold and selling gold in the United States, or buying computer processors and doing something similar, but I ended up using trading to do it.
Gili or Adam, we were talking about some companies in London or LA who are kind of licensing the film distribution, so we can see a new way to mainstream movies, this type of platform. So you mentioned that you had a few knowledge on that, or some companies or who wants to start.
I think you knew the names.
Film Chain.
We kept on saying.
Film Chain is a company based in London, and the other one is I Produce, which is based in LA. But whatever the name, what kind of in terms of we were talking about the music industry, now going more into the content industry, the distribution of TV or film or this type of things. You mentioned that you had some.
I'm less familiar with those.
No, okay.
I thought you were talking about. There's another one. Sorry.
No, the name doesn't matter. Just to give.
No, on the backside, and I haven't tracked the ones that are trying to do film distribution as much. One of the things is just there's whether it's music distribution or film distribution, these are very protected lines that have been around for a long time, and there's so many middlemen that. If you literally get it from the people making the movie over to the people watching the movie without this, you would save a lot of, the producer, in theory, would make heck of a lot more money, right? Sort of like Alibaba being able to pay somebody that can now sell something on Alibaba just coming to the American market directly, which is happening with regular production. The other problem with the current model that we have for both music and film production is that it's oblique. It's very hard to see through, especially in music. People get a check maybe, and there's some amount of money, and maybe it's 90 days, maybe it's 150 days. How long is it? Where did this money come from? How many hands did it touch? What's really going on? Unless you are a Taylor Swift, it's very, very, and even if you are, it's extremely challenging to try to actually figure out whether or not you're getting paid right or on time or anything else.
Probably not.
The theory, the sense of it, the history of the music industry is maybe you're not. And the film industry probably, I think by reputation, and if you look at the court cases, is probably a little bit better. But you do have the same sort of challenges. And so I think part of the idea of using a blockchain for recordation of the works for distribution of money for payment, what have you, is actually having that visibility into the chain itself. So the same way you may have heard, if you're following blockchain, one of the most amazing things is how much it's penetrating large supply chain management. Making sure that the shoes that you're buying here in the States, actually came from these factories, and the manufacturers actually, this rubber came from here, and that shoelace came from there, and it came over on this boat. Well, the same thing can actually be applied to media, very similarly. So I think that's where some of these models are going. But the challenge is that in a way it needs to go after the long tail, because the people that are in the forefront of music and film distribution today have their models. They're the kings of those kings and queens of those models, and both because they understand them and because they know who the players are, and they are rewarded for commanding those models, don't have a strong incentive to go after it. One of the competitors to Ujo, I'm trying to remember the name now, I talked to one of their investors this morning, and it's a royalty model. It's again, one of these questions about how do we manage royalty for content. And he was saying, he was very adamant, they're having a very hard time penetrating into the music industry, into other industries where this could be employed. Well, the reason is because there's, in those inefficiencies and in the lack of transparency, there's also a lot of profit, and it would impact that. So it's not just, as well as the normal barriers to entry of any new technology or any new business model.
Yeah, any comment, Josh? Because I saw you were like, you like what he said.
Yeah, no,
right?
I was just thinking. Yeah. Still thinking.
All right, it helps. Gilly, back to you about this distribution, because I'm sure that you have something for us, right?
Sure.
Yes.
So talking about content, maybe I can share a different angle that we were working with a media group, one of the biggest media group in the US, and they were struggling to monetize and to keep track of they have like 3,000 photographers working for them, but they can't really keep track of what's their photos, who's using their photos, etc. So we worked with them for a couple of days, and we developed 3 interesting use cases that were related to authenticity of the content. The first one was all about monetization. Basically, crawl into the news outlet website, whether it's CNN, CBS, whatever news outlet, and basically being able to detect the right photos that their freelancer took, and match it and tell them, hey, they already have the SLA between the news outlet and the media group, and they just needed to being able to show that it's their photos, and there's like technology out there that already exists, and once they have their photos on a public registry, it's really easy to make the match and really charge for what this news outlet already using. The second use case was about fake news. There was a lot, every day basically you've seen photos that are not, some people say it was taken in that place or in that time, but there's obviously a lot of fake news about it, whether it's intentionally or not intentionally. So having a timestamp attached to each of the photos, when the photo was taken, where the photo was taken, by whom the photo was taken, that's a huge tool helping this media group to really fight fake news and reduce liability, which is a huge issue for them. And the third use case we developed is around user-generated content, basically allowing every one of us taking photos when we run into interesting incident, and sell it to them, and we make money. They have more access to photos all around the world, and user-generated content. That's basically the future of content. So this is the 3 different use cases we develop for the content, and more in the photojournalism side, but somehow related.
The New York Times had, I made some research for you guys. So the New York Times did a project called the News Provenance Project. So it's very tough for those companies to make money. Just a few of them are profitable. So have you heard about any project in that domain specifically?
Yeah, we're involved in this project. And, but yeah, this is something that from Twitter to Adobe, everybody is, and again, it goes back to authenticity of the content. And the idea is to really being able to keep track what's the origin of this content, what was the distribution channel, and how you can prove that this is a real news. So, and I think blockchain is a really great platform to support all of these really big problems.
What type of content you see more? Okay, it's a year and a half that your company Matter Music is live. So, what kind of content do you see people interested in most of the time? What is the traction that you see on your platform?
What kind of content do you think?
Music, mostly music. Music, social posts too. Because one big thing on like SoundCloud and Spotify, SoundCloud they have direct messaging, but on Spotify, let's say you're a big fan of Kanye and you really want to work with him, you're never going to reach Kanye. You'll probably never find his manager's email either. But on our platform, other than, we have like a global live chat, so you can talk to anybody on the platform. We have a global feed, we have direct messaging, and we're going to have private groups that you can start with other people or public groups. And I think that's like a big drawing point to our platform, because I was asking a lot of people, what do you care about most? No ads, strong social features, or multiple revenue streams. Most people said strong social features, because like if it wasn't for SoundCloud and direct messaging people being able to comment on songs, I wouldn't have probably met like 99% of the people I know in music.
Yeah, like me and Josh wouldn't have met if it weren't for that.
So I think the social aspect on our platform is probably what people are
And working with people worldwide is really important when you're building a music career. It's like you have to be able to work with like Ryan Jacob, he's in Australia. I have producers in like Tokyo. Josh is from across the country. In Spotify, it's not really possible for me to do that now. You post music and it kind of gets lost in 4,000 new uploaded songs per day without a real way to connect with another artist. And often that's what you need to take your music to the next level. Like I had no music background or no social profiles about music. Then my first release hit like top 3 on SoundCloud charts for independent music because I worked with this producer from Boston that was phenomenal. So you need to be able to connect with people in music, in media, especially when you're in the earlier stages of your career.
Sure. Second try, you don't want to say what you're doing with the New York Times.
No.
It's not an easy job, I'm telling you. Better sit where I sit usually. What can, oh my God, I'm making a joke, I'm losing myself. Yes, Jan, help me here. You have invested in 15 startups. Do you see, what are the guys more excited about? Some media stuff that you see, or what is the?
Yeah, so I guess this is, I think this may be up for debate, but having been in a corporate for a long time, and granted, the era that I was in blockchain and at a corporate was pretty different, but I'm pretty down on enterprise blockchains. In large part because the most disruptive piece to this whole thing is the peer-to-peer aspect of it, and in particular the business model that comes with it. And I think that any incumbent, whether it's a bank or enterprise XYZ, is going to really, really struggle with that. Because in the end, like this is what I found when I was at Citigroup, is that the technology is actually not that difficult. The hard part is distribution, which enterprises do have, but the problem that they have is disrupting their own business model. And that's why I'm quite down on kind of those kind of prospects, at least from a like venture building perspective and a venture investing perspective. So the things that I'm most interested in, and my team is most interested in, are truly open decentralized or at a minimum distributed networks. There's this whole like kind of debate as to whether you want to go full decentralization first, or what we advocate towards, which is what we call progressive decentralization, where it kind of starts semi-centralized and it starts moving to more decentralized over time. And so we look for open networks that primarily have crypto tokens. So about 60 to 70% of the investments that we go into, if there is kind of an equity structure, it's actually just a holding kind of vehicle for tokens eventually when the equity converts to token ownership, which a lot of other investors are not quite ready for or structured for. So we look at token networks, and when it comes to token networks, the things that we're most excited about right now, there's 3 areas that we've been investing in. What we call decentralized infrastructure. So this is more about how to bring kind of this technology to the masses, scalability, and things that you've hosted other panels on before. We do think that future of work and play is a really interesting space. So about 4 or 5 of our investments are kind of like loosely in the gaming space, and then also in future of work and how tokenized networks can actually solve or help solve the dislocation that we see in society today between technology and labor. And then the last part that we're really interested in, and most of our investments recently have been in, is in what's called DeFi, which is short for decentralized finance. So it's basically turning this financial system and making it more open to the world, which obviously I have a big passion for given my past experience. And so we see a lot of traction in the DeFi space. Long way of saying, like, I actually think that digital media is going to be one of the biggest opportunities for crypto and blockchains.
Yes.
The question on my end is more, what does the timing look like? Because we've actually seen, or I've seen multiple iterations of digital media crypto companies over the last like 5 years, and they've kind of been too far ahead of the market. And so I kind of estimate that like in the next like 2 to 4 years, we're going to see some really big things in digital media. I'm looking at social networks actually a lot, and also other forms of digital media or content. So music is a good one, video content. But lately I've been looking a lot in social.
Okay.
Let me tie something.
Yeah, I give you some more time. Okay, just think about it. No, I wanted. Yeah, please.
Let me tie something that he said directly into sort of content and so decentralized finance. A lot of us have been thinking, well, syndicated loans and mortgage-backed securities, and how do you get that and decentralize it so that you don't have this bank in the middle? But it actually can play. And something I've been trying to do for a while and haven't been successful is taking artists of different statures and sizes and taking their intellectual property, their catalog, maybe their name and likeness in terms of their capability to generate advertising revenue, whatever, put it into a legal structure, and then taking that and doing what we call securitization, which means basically selling people pieces of it. So now, if you like Kanye, Kanye always gets used as an example in all these panels. Always, it's very, maybe what you're doing is you're actually buying a piece of what that person is producing over some amount of time, or maybe it's just their back catalog. I can chop that up legally into different pieces, and this actually was first thought of by David Bowie, doing what we call Bowie bonds, and what he did is he could not buy his back catalog, and he didn't own it, as a lot of artists do not, and so he actually sold bonds in order to buy the back catalog, and then sold pieces of it off. Now, it sounded like all of his fans were buying it. It turned out it was Prudential, actually, that bought most of it. True. But the point is if I can help some weird, funky band like the December, I don't know, I'm going to use some band that nobody knows. But, some weird, strange band that, Jacques Dutronc, some French band from, the 1960s.
Anytime, it's my friend.
Yeah, that's what
we met in Corsica.
Yeah. So, I'm trying to buy, he was a French pop star in the late 60s. And I just want to support him still and the people that love him. I want to put money into, I'll help him finance buying his back catalog, and wait, I can get a profit out of that as well. That sounds like a fantastic way of a fan connecting with an artist in a way that's a little bit more compelling, possibly profitable, rather than just the T-shirt. Don't get me wrong, I love my T-shirts. But that's how one development in blockchain over here in in decentralized finance, exchanges that are actually decentralized as opposed to NASDAQ can actually end up playing into media and artist growth.
I can see that Josh is still thinking, but still thinking, right?
Always
Thinking about a few different things.
Always.
Yeah, and you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I was
please.
just going to say, like, actually, there's a lot of precedent in what Adam just said. It combines actually like what's called STOs, security token offerings, which is basically just tokenizing equities and then selling them as like traditional securities. And that's a kind of like use case that is gaining a lot of traction in like just equity issuances, bond issuances, and also real estate, fractionalizing real estate, which is happening all over kind of the world and also in the US. The other thing is an NBA player, was it in the Knicks or something? He actually did that with his 5-year contract. So he actually took his like $35 million contract and he wanted to put it into a legal vehicle and then tokenize it and sell it off. And the NBA blocked it. But that happened like earlier this year. So you can already tell that people are trying to do those things. And I think it's more a question of like when, not if.
It's also how, because as you put it, like
Yep.
with the NBA star, the problem is, if I go down to Taylor Swift, which you know I do, but if you go to, she's probably has 360 contracts that cover her entire career that are already captured. There's already something, if you want some ownership of something, there ain't much to give. Maybe Instagram influencer appearances or something is still left to be had, I don't know. So you really have to find artists early on, which is actually, they have a background in electronic dance music. And these artists have been used to trying to figure out different models for connecting with their audience and also monetizing what it is that they do. And if we can catch them early enough in a way that's comfortable for them, because you don't want somebody to feel owned, right? You want them to feel empowered and enabled. But if you do that before they become the largest artists around and captured in 360 deals and record label deals and what have you, then you have an opportunity to shape these things. NBA, I don't know if you'll ever have it. It might take a little bit longer.
Anything you've seen interesting in the advertising? We mentioned a little bit. You were mentioning just the advertising. How the some revenue can come from that. But anything noticeable in advertising? Interesting.
Well, other than the butterflies, we've seen a lot of people go into the ad tech space, but I don't know that I'd really characterize it as media and entertainment. I mean, it's really ad technology. But the problem is ad tech's been broken in many ways. One is you don't know where your ads are showing up. I mean, one of my clients, Undertone, way back, I want to say 2006, we came up with a $50,000 guarantee because we were the one company that could actually say, your ad will show up on that page, and if it didn't, we would pay you $50,000. If you found one ad on the wrong page, we would give you $50,000. But what we were trying to do is highlight is that most of the time these agencies that really were having a hard time. So there's been a number of companies that have been building blockchain technology to make sure that you know where your ads are going and that somebody can easily audit it.
Traceability, this type of things.
So I've seen, I've seen that.
So in the gaming, I just noticed something that maybe someone has an opinion on it. There were a bunch of cryptocurrencies. I don't know, hundreds of it, and it was the crypto kitties. No one heard of? Yeah, Josh.
Yeah. Have you guys tried it? You can buy and breed kittens and sell them to each other for like 100 Ethereum or something. Up to like hundreds of Ethereum, yeah.
Nah.
Did you get into it?
No.
Oh, if you're asking about some other gamification uses of Bitcoin, one of my friends, he's developing a startup right now. You can bet on outcomes of streamers that are playing video games. So let's say, do you guys know the game Counter-Strike? You walk around shooting terrorists, and you can bet whether a person will die with a gunshot to the head or die with like a C4 blowing up. And it's not just that game, it's like FIFA too, like NBA, all the stuff online, but you can bet on outcomes. So I guess that's like a cool use for blockchain.
Okay, so I've been told that it's time for a Q&A, so because I have many questions, I was really working on this, I'm telling you. I promise, so many things. God, no, any question from the audience? Go ahead, shoot, madam.
Is there any use for blockchain in the ticketing business, where you have the middleman making all the money and the fans not being able to get tickets because bad
Yeah, Tari is one that's been around for about 2 years or so. That's one that I know of, but I'm sure there are others.
There's a company in London called Bit Ticket, who's in this part of the industry.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of similar where, in particular,
Ask me
like
tomorrow.
one of the bigger problems, as I understand it, is secondary markets, right? So because you can, they're issued as, well, either fungible tokens or non-fungible tokens, NFTs, right? When they sell, like kind of like what you were saying earlier, where a song might collect its own licensing fees as it gets passed around, like that's kind of the idea, right? So the company built this protocol that helps events basically issue tickets to their event. But as these tickets get traded on the secondary markets, because it's on the platform, they can capture some of the fees associated with the secondary sales, which is actually how CryptoKitties kind of works, to be honest.
By the way, those gets rid of counterfeit tickets, which can be problematic in different scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this company in London is avoiding the scalping of tickets, this type of things.
The biggest problem, though, with those is just distribution. Like, how do you actually achieve scale? It's just really hard.
How many questions, Pimo? Because you have a question. No?
Yes, so recently there's been quite a big focus on manipulating video, and I saw a video yesterday, I think, that appeared to have Obama saying something, but they actually had another black man beside it who they'd actually recorded and then manipulated the video to show him speaking. I think this is really dangerous, and I'm hoping that the blockchain might have some solutions for that, because we've been swamped with fake news, and when it starts to get to the point of video, eek!
Fake news.
So I think this is what part of what I was referring before is fake news. I think what this technology called deep fake, and this is becoming more and more common. And I think many news outlets and media outlets are really concerned with that. I think being able to really prove authenticity of the origin of the content could solve it. It goes back to counterfeiting. I think it doesn't really matter if you're selling shoes or some video. If you can really prove and show the entire journey of this piece of media or shoe, that I think that could be very helpful for the user and the entire ecosystem. We've been doing a counterfeiting project with one of the Fortune 500 company, and the idea was really to keep track. They have like tens of millions of dollars of loss through counterfeiting, and the idea is to really keep track from the manufacturing. It's usually done in Asia and all the way to North America, and it's a huge problem with there's like transportation company involved and retail and distribution, and it's really complex to really manage the entire identity of all the users and how you keep track of this huge issue, and it still hasn't been solved, but I think it's to some extent related to content.
Another question? Yes.
Okay, I'm really interested. We have these streaming services like Spotify and Apple Music, and ways that consumers get access to either listen to or buy music that they really enjoy. I'm wondering if you have an opinion, any of the panelists, of who will be the first biggest mover in the United States, let's just say.
Shopify made a small move by acquiring a company recently, but it was
Mediation.
more, media.
Spotify? Yeah, acquired media.
Spotify, sorry, Shopify.
You mean move into crypto or move into?
Moving into, so that consumers, so for example, I am continually listening to something on the radio or listening to something walking down the street, and I'll go, okay, Shazam it, what is that music, what is that song? And then I'll go ahead and buy it off of Apple immediately for 99 cents or whatever. There's going to be at some point a token version of this. I'm wondering if any of you have an opinion of who's that gonna be, how's that gonna work? And I can see that being a massive way that Americans, at least, really start using cryptocurrency tokens.
So here's the thing. It's more likely that, well, more likely. Predicting the future is hard, especially when it hasn't happened yet. It seems to me more likely that platforms will adopt application-neutral cryptocurrencies for what you're talking about, rather than a new platform necessarily that says, oh, you know what, I've invented my own cryptocurrency, you'll use that, and by the way, if you're producing songs, come to my platform. You know, I think they're going to capture a lot of it. But if you're looking for like the mainstream, huge, massive bulk of what's on Apple, you know, it's going to be a matter of whether or not a company like that adopts some mainstream stablecoin or some other cryptocurrency for it. But you have to look at what they're doing. What they're also, at least in Apple's case, is Apple's been building out payments, traditional payments, and now with the new credit card, in a very, very aggressive way.
Yep.
I have a...
Yeah. Sure.
So, I mean, I don't really know how the music industry is going to evolve into this, but like one of the things that we do, which is very different than other investors, is IDEO does this thing called design fiction, which is actually like a way to understand what the future looks like before it's here. And there's something that we've been doing on the digital media side, which is kind of interesting. Like, so I don't know what company is going to do this, but we kind of have a theory for what it might look like, which is in the Ethereum space, there's this thing called composability, which is the ability to create kind of new things and then compose and recompose on top of that to create new things, right? So you see that actually a lot in DeFi, where people are building protocol on protocol on protocol and just forking the code until it creates this like Frankensteiner thing that is built on all these other things. So one of the interesting things actually related to deepfakes is you could see a world where like through a platform like the ones that you guys are building or whatever, professional or normal people create snippets of songs or media that other people can start to compose and recompose into a song or many different songs. So like Taylor Swift, for example, could create a hook, like a 5-second hook, and then multiple people could start to compose that and pay for her to recompose into like infinity number of songs, right? You can imagine how that could play into movies. So like what if a film studio actually just produced and then launched onto a network that could completely recomposable thousands of 30-second clips where you could actually deep fake your own face onto an actor and then create your own movie by recomposing thousands of little snippets. So what I'm most excited about, and as it relates to this, is actually how this technology, whether it's media or otherwise, creates totally new user experiences to the world, where it's kind of like when I transitioned from the BlackBerry to the iPhone. I took it out and I was like, what is this thing? It's ridiculous. And then I opened it and I was like, holy shit, my life has changed. I can't believe that I can now do that on this versus like a BlackBerry. That's what I think is going to make like a $1 trillion company or something that changes the world. It's not something that just tokenizes something that you see today, but actually creates something totally new that you can't even imagine.
Well, that's going on already, right? With remixes, for instance. I mean, isn't that kind of what you're talking
potentially,
about? Beyond,
but
right?
potentially, but there's no native like economic model associated with it or
Right.
revenue sharing or whatever,
So
right? So the incentives are not like, it doesn't amplify it potentially as high as it could.
So we might wind up the panel, but you guys can actually talk to the panelists after this. I just wondered if you could give them a big hand. Also, if you're a Battery member, we actually run these events, one in San Francisco and one in Palo Alto every month. Very diverse, very interesting panels. So please sign up on the laptop outside with your name and email address and we'll keep you updated. Thank you so much for coming tonight.